It begins in silence, where even words seem to disappear. You've carried the pain of others for so long that your body bends under a weight that was never yours. Their anger, their emptiness, their hidden shame, all of it settled inside you like smoke from a fire you never started. And yet, you were the one struggling to breathe. For years, you thought this was compassion, to hold what others refused to carry, to be the quiet shore where every storm could crash without cost. But one night, the tide inside you does not return. The sea within you no longer answers the pull. And in that deep stillness, something stronger than kindness rises. Something that finally opens its eyes without fear. It does not rage. It does not announce itself. It simply stops pretending. Explanation becomes a cramped language, apology a costume you no longer fit. What begins is not rebellion, but recognition. A precise, almost surgical awareness that many of the feelings moving through your chest do not originate there. You can trace each thread back to the hands that spun it. This tightness was borrowed from the anxious, this dread from those who dread themselves, this guilt from those who arrange their lives so someone else would carry it. You see the commerce of projection in all its clarity, how people barter with the parts of themselves they refuse to meet. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Psychologists give this doorway a beautiful name: individuation. I prefer to call it sovereignty, the slow reclaiming of your interior kingdom from the occupiers who moved in under the flag of love, need, or crisis. Sovereignty doesn't throw anyone out. It simply opens the windows and lets the truth blow through. Suddenly, the emergencies that used to colonize your day begin to collapse like paper tents in the rain. You hear the familiar siren songs, "Help me, explain me, forgive me before I've changed," and you discover that your legs will not carry you toward them anymore. Not because you are cruel, but because your feet have remembered the ground they belong to. Every genuine transformation has an underworld. Call it the night sea, the long descent, the blackening of everything you thought solid. One doesn't enter by choice. You fall through a cracked floor of certainty when the cost of being useful to everyone finally bankrupts the self. In that darkness, time loses its organization. You wake as a stranger to your face. You speak and your voice travels past a stranger's teeth. Grief becomes an atmosphere, and panic a narrow room where the walls sigh. You wonder whether your empathy has died. You wonder whether you have. But death was needed. Death of the mask that smiled while being erased. Death of the reflex that translated every wound into a reason to be gentler with the knife. What dissolves is the false architecture built from survival. Be nice, be necessary, be the one who understands while no one else tries. The underworld is merciless, but it is honest. It shows you what never belonged to you by letting it burn on the altar of exhaustion. And when the smoke clears, you begin to feel a texture beneath the ashes, an unscarred floor, the original ground of your being. It was there the whole time, patient as stone. Here is where the psyche reveals a cunning intelligence. After months or years of absorbing foreign weather, your nervous system learns the chemistry of storms. It can smell a pressure drop across a room. It can taste a lie in the tone before the sentence is finished. This is not cynicism. It is literacy. You no longer read faces for approval. You read them for ownership. Is this person carrying their own heart, their own history, their own shadow? Or are they holding out an invisible basket, asking you to take what they cannot bear and call it love? Pain, when held consciously, becomes antibody. The body remembers every manipulation the way it remembers every flu. A hand reaches for your boundaries with a silken story, and your skin heats with quiet refusal. The old urge to explain evaporates. Explanation was how the invasion got past the gates. Now you answer with your life. The no is not a blade. It is the shape of your being, the simple truth of what you are and are not available for. The result is strange and luminous. You do not become harder, you become clearer. And clarity is a kind of invulnerability that requires no armor. There was a time when you mistook unconditional giving for love. You see it differently now. You understand how the untended soul recruits helpers as it flees itself, how the unexamined wound builds a theater and casts you as the nurse, the confessor, the echo. You understand why you were chosen, because your empathy could be stretched until it looked like infinity. But infinity has a cost, and the bill arrived in sleepless nights, in the constant hum of anxiety, in the aching suspicion that if you stopped carrying everything, everything would fall. It did fall, and what collapsed was the pretense that kept everyone from meeting the real work. In the underworld, you confront what many call the shadow, not a villain to be defeated, but a wilderness to be mapped. It contains all the life you postponed, anger you convinced yourself was unspiritual, desire you mislabeled as dangerous, edges you sanded until your hands bled. At first it terrifies you. How much force waits there? How much recovered yes and restored no? But as your eyes adjust, the dark is not empty. It is fertile. The parts you exiled start speaking in their original voices. They tell you what they were protecting. They tell you what they want for you now. And as you listen, a paradox becomes flesh. You become more gentle because you are no longer weak. There is a moment, small, almost private, when the center clicks. It doesn't announce a return. It reveals that you had never left. Your presence thickens. Your attention becomes a lamp that cannot be tilted away from truth. People feel it before they understand it. Those who fed on fog retreat. They require hallways without light. Those who longed for actuality come closer. They do not need rescuing, they need witness. Your very nearness becomes a mirror that refuses to flatter. Projection fails on its first throw. The hook cannot find tissue. This unsettles some and consoles others. Either way, the theater begins to close. You might call this influence, but it is simpler, coherence. The strands of you are braided. What you feel, what you think, what you say, what you do. These are no longer four musicians sight-reading in different keys. They have become a quartet that understands the song. That music alters rooms, not because it is loud, but because anything out of tune cannot pretend it is not. In your presence, habits rise to the surface and ask to be named. Some will accuse you of coldness. They are meeting, often for the first time, their own temperature without your warmth doing the work. Others will call you changed, and they are right. You did not toughen, you refined, you did not close, you stopped leaking. A solitude returns, not as punishment, but as homeland. It is not the panicked empty of earlier days. It is a wide plain where you can hear your steps. The loneliness of sovereignty is real. Few can breathe at this altitude without blaming the thin air on you. Yet the quiet is generous. It restores the nerve endings singed by years of emergency. You begin to taste your own choices again. Even the small ones. When to sleep, how to work. Which music fits the day? Dignity threads through your routines like a hidden gold. You realize that ordinary life, when lived by a soul that owns itself, is an extraordinary rebellion. From this ground, love becomes distinguishable from hunger. Love does not ask you to trade your clarity for belonging. Love does not outsource responsibility to your tenderness. Love approaches with its own backbone, its own candle, its own willingness to sit in the storm without handing you the bucket. You find yourself available to that kind of meeting, not because you have resolved every wound or perfected your boundaries, but because you no longer confuse sacrifice with intimacy. You can hold another's sorrow as a witness without dressing it in your skin. You can be moved without being moved out of yourself. There is a refinement of power that follows, the kind that leaves no fingerprints. You do not steer people, you steer yourself. You do not win arguments, you let reality speak. Standards become the architecture of your days, not the slogans on your walls. You decline what insults your soul and accept what enlarges it. This selects your companions without ceremony. Those who are allergic to accountability will peel away on their own. Those who can breathe honestly will remain. The field simplifies. What remains is enough. If someone tries to pull you back into the old dance, panic tones, sudden flames, the familiar theater of crises, you notice the script and do not audition. Compassion remains, but it has eyes. You can distinguish between pain that seeks healing and pain that seeks a host. One you sit beside, the other you release to its author. This discernment is not a new rule. It is the transcript of a body that trusts itself. And when you trust your body, your soul finally believes you. There is danger here too, a subtle drift toward hardness disguised as wisdom. After drowning, one might vow never to touch water again. The psyche loves extremes. Equilibrium is adult work. So you learn the art of permeable boundaries. Not walls, not gates flung wide, but living membranes that know the difference between nourishment an infection. You keep your empathy, but you return it to its rightful size. You keep your openness, but pair it with selection. You are not a fortress, you are a home, and homes have doors. The culture around you might not celebrate this. Systems that profit from confusion do not applaud clarity. Groups arranged around shared denial cannot welcome the one who will not pretend. The old tribe may call you disloyal, yet the world is large. There are places where honesty is not a scandal, where intimacy includes responsibility, where sensitivity is read as strength rather than an invitation to exploit. You begin to find those places, or they find you. The signal travels. What do you become on the far side of the night sea? Not an opposite of your former self, but its fulfillment. The tenderness remains, freed from servitude. The intuition sharpens, freed from anxiety. The capacity to understand others deepens now that you no longer abandon yourself for access. You embody what older languages called a healer, not because you fix people, but because you remind them of their own capacity to be whole. Your presence supports courage in others. They feel permission in your boundaries to grow a spine of their own. This is not heroism, it is hygiene. It is the psyche returning to its ecological balance after years of contamination. Your attention becomes clean water you no longer waste on fires that refuse to stop burning. Your words become seasoned, fewer, anchored in experience rather than performance. Your silences widen, they teach. Even your refusal becomes instructive, not as punishment, but as the living proof that a person may choose themselves and still love the world.